I was still holding the folded flag from my son's funeral when Emily turned to me and said, "We're leaving Pennsylvania next week. It's better if Lucas doesn't come here anymore." Her voice was flat, almost bored, as if she was announcing a trip to the grocery store, not cutting me out of my grandson's life. The living room was still filled with condolence flowers, yet she was already packing emotional suitcases I had no key to. Lucas, standing behind her, stared at me with those wide, frightened eyes children get when they sense adults telling half-truths. His small hand clutching his worn dinosaur backpack trembled. I whispered, "Sweetheart, are you okay?" He suddenly stepped forward, wrapped his arms around my waist, and said with a shaking voice, "Grandma, I want to stay with you. Please don't let Mom take me away." Emily stiffened. "Lucas, don't start." She shot a glare sharp enough to slice through bone. The room fell quiet except for the hum of my old Toyota Camry parked outside, its engine cooling with that familiar ticking sound. I felt the weight of every year I had lived, every mistake, every fear of losing the last piece of my son. After they left, I sat alone on the couch, my hands gripping my old iPhone. The screen cracked from when I dropped it at the hospital the day my son passed. I opened a photo of him holding baby Lucas. My son's smile was warm. Mine was younger. Lucas was just a bundle in a blue blanket. I pressed the phone to my chest. That evening, I tried distracting myself by reading on my battered Kindle, but every word blurred into worry. I reheated leftover soup, spilled half of it, and laughed bitterly at myself. Lucas would have teased me for being the queen of messes like he always did. By 10 o'clock, I managed to doze off on the couch. Then a sudden banging jerked me awake. I rushed to the front door and swung it open. Lucas stood there in dinosaur pajamas, out of breath, clutching his backpack like it was life itself. His cheeks were streaked with tears. "Grandma," he gasped, "Mom's on the phone with someone. She said she's leaving tonight. She said I'll be fine without you." My heart dropped to my knees. "Does she know you're here?" I asked. He shook his head violently. "No, I jumped out my window. I didn't want them to take me away." Behind him, the night air was sharp, the streetlights humming. A faint dog barked in the distance, then silence. I pulled Lucas inside and locked the door, my hands trembling so badly that the keys clattered against the doorknob. "Baby, you're safe. You're safe with me," I whispered, hugging him tightly. But as I held him, one thought chilled me more than the night outside. If Emily discovered he was gone, anything could happen. The pounding on my door jolted both me and Lucas. It wasn't the timid kind of knock a visitor made. It was sharp, furious, like someone trying to break in. I pulled Lucas behind me and opened the door just a crack. Emily stood on the porch, face flushed, hair messy as if she'd run here. Her phone was clutched in her hand, the screen still glowing. "Give me my son," she hissed. Before I could speak, Lucas pressed his face into my back, whispering, "Please don't make me go." Emily tried to push the door, but I held it firmly. "Emily, he came here on his own. Let's talk calmly." "Calmly?" she scoffed. "You think you can manipulate a child and steal him from me? I'm filing for restricted visitation tomorrow." Restricted visitation. The words hit me like a punch. Lucas clung tighter. "Mom, I just wanted to see Grandma." "Enough, Lucas," she snapped. "Get your things. Now." His small shoulders shook. I swallowed everything I wanted to scream and forced myself to speak gently. "Lucas, sweetheart. Go with your mom for now. I'll see you soon." He looked at me as though I'd betrayed him. But he obeyed. When the door shut behind them, the silence felt like grief all over again. The next morning on my way to the mailbox, Avery, my elderly neighbor, waved me over. She held a steaming Starbucks cup in one hand and an Amazon box tucked under her arm. "You look like you barely slept," she said. "I didn't," I admitted. Avery leaned closer. "I heard yelling last night. Everything okay?" I told her the truth, the parts I could say without breaking down. Her expression softened, then sharpened. "You know, I've seen things, the way Emily treats Lucas sometimes. If you need someone to speak up, I'm here." Her words filled a little of the hollow space inside me. But the real blow came that afternoon. At school pickup, Lucas walked out holding his teacher's hand. Emily was already waiting, arms crossed. When Lucas saw me, his whole face lit up. Until Emily shot him a warning look. His smile collapsed. The teacher said gently, "Lucas told us he didn't want to visit anymore. He said it makes him uncomfortable." My heart cracked. Lucas wouldn't even meet my eyes. Emily smirked, tiny, almost invisible, but I saw it. That evening I found Lucas had slipped something into my coat pocket, a small plastic bag filled with cocoa powder. A note in childish handwriting said, "For when you miss me." I laughed through tears. The sweetness hurt. I called every lawyer I could afford, none fit. Then the next morning, at the grocery store parking lot, a familiar voice called my name. "Margaret?" I turned. It was George Miller, my late husband's colleague, now a family attorney. "You look like someone who needs help," he said, and for the first time in days, I felt the tiniest bit of hope. George invited me to his office the next morning, a small corner space above a family dental clinic. The place looked nothing like those sleek law firms you see on TV. His desk was covered in paper stacks, an old printer sat crookedly on a side table, and a Starbucks cup with a collapsing cardboard sleeve balanced dangerously near a pile of folders. "Sorry about the mess," he said, brushing a donut crumb off a chair. "I'm a better lawyer than I am a housekeeper." For the first time that week, I cracked a tiny smile. We started going over the situation. George listened quietly, occasionally jotting notes on a yellow legal pad. When I got to the part about Lucas saying he wanted to stay with me, my voice shook. I felt childish for crying in front of someone I barely knew, but George didn't interrupt. Finally, he exhaled. "Margaret, this will be hard. Courts usually favor the parent unless there's solid evidence." "I know," I whispered, "but he's all I have left." George leaned back. "Do you have anything that shows Lucas expressed wanting to live with you? Messages? Videos?" I hesitated. "Avery recorded a video a few weeks ago. Lucas was in my backyard telling me he felt safe with me. She sent it to my phone." "Perfect," George said. "That could help establish emotional attachment." I opened my photos and froze. The video was gone, not relocated, not moved, completely gone. I felt cold all over. "It was here yesterday," I murmured. George leaned over. "You sure?" "Yes, I watched it the night before the funeral." My hands shook so hard I nearly dropped my old iPhone, with its cracked corner and the tape holding the charger port stable. George frowned. Could someone have deleted it? The thought hit me like a slap. Emily had taken my phone at the funeral when she said she needed to call her sister. She held it for almost 10 minutes. My stomach tightened. George tried to stay practical. Maybe Avery still has the original file? I grabbed my coat and walked straight to Avery's house. She opened the door with curlers still in her hair. "Sweetheart, what's wrong?" I told her. Avery's eyes widened. She rushed to her kitchen, where her tablet sat charging. After a few minutes of furious tapping, she let out a gasp. "It's here." "Thank God, it's still here. I thought I deleted it, but it's in my iCloud backups." Relief washed over me so fast it made me dizzy. Back at George's office, we tried printing the video transcript, but the old printer jammed 3 times in a row. George muttered something about technology plotting against him, making me laugh through my nerves. Then George's phone buzzed. He read the message and looked up at me. "They've scheduled the hearing," he said. "When?" I asked. His expression tightened. "In 2 days." My breath caught. 2 days wasn't enough for anything, and suddenly everything felt terrifyingly real. The next 2 days crept in like a storm I could feel in my bones. I woke before sunrise, the house too quiet without Lucas humming Saturday morning cartoons or asking if we could make cocoa, just because. Every instinct in me wanted to drive to Emily's place and check on him. But George had warned me, any unnecessary contact can look bad in court. Let him come if he can. Otherwise, wait. Waiting felt like punishment. That afternoon, as I stepped outside to get the mail, Avery waved from her porch. She was wearing an oversized sweater with a giant smiling pumpkin, even though Halloween was months away. "I found something else," she called. I hurried over. Avery handed me her phone. On the screen was a photo from the same day she recorded the video. Lucas sitting on my back steps, his head resting on my shoulder, his little hands gripping my sleeve like I was his anchor. "I forgot I even took this," Avery said. "My daughter told me iCloud keeps everything." Terrifying, but helpful. I hugged her and she laughed breathlessly. "Careful, sweetie. My back's not what it used to be." Just then, a curtain across the street moved. I turned. Lucas's small face peeked out from Emily's living room window. He pressed his palm against the glass. My heart jumped to my throat. I lifted my hand, but before I could wave, a shadow yanked the curtain closed. A second later, Emily's voice echoed across the yard. Margaret, don't stand there staring into my home. It's inappropriate. The humiliation burned through me. I wanted to scream, but instead I whispered, I just wanted to see if he was okay. He's fine, she snapped, and he won't be coming over before the hearing. Avery, muttering under her breath, said, She's lucky I'm too old to jump fences. Despite the tension, I snorted out a laugh. Avery grinned. See? Still got it. But the ache didn't fade. That night, as I washed dishes, I heard a small tapping noise on the kitchen window. I turned and froze. Lucas stood outside, hidden in the shadows, just tall enough to reach the bottom of the glass. His breath fogged the pain. He mouthed something. I leaned closer. I miss home, he whispered through the crack where the window didn't seal properly. I pressed my palm to the glass. I miss you too, baby. He looked over his shoulder, panicked, then ran off before I could open the door. I spent the next morning sitting in my Toyota Camry outside his school, hoping to catch a glimpse of him. When the kids poured out, I spotted him instantly, his dinosaur backpack bouncing as he walked. Lucas, I called softly. He turned. His face lit up for a heartbeat, then Emily grabbed his shoulder. Still. Lucas looked back at me and whispered just loud enough for me to read his lips. Don't give up. And somehow, that tiny sentence felt like armor around my breaking heart. The courthouse smelled faintly of old carpet and disinfectant, like every government building I'd ever been in. I sat on a hard plastic chair outside the family courtroom, my hands trembling around a small paper cup of water. My iPhone buzzed twice in my purse, spam calls, probably. But I couldn't focus on anything except the hollow ache in my chest. Emily arrived with Lucas a few minutes later. She looked polished, wearing a neat blazer and tight smile. Lucas, in his dinosaur t-shirt, looked painfully small beside her. When he saw me, he instinctively took a step forward, until Emily tightened her grip on his shoulder. The bailiff called our case. Inside, the courtroom was quiet, cold, and somehow judgmental even before anyone spoke. When Emily took the stand, she answered each question with the smoothness of someone who'd rehearsed. Has your son ever expressed that he wants to live with his grandmother? Never, Emily said without blinking. Any idea that he prefers her is entirely made up. The words slammed into me. My fingers dug into the fabric of my skirt. The judge turned to me. Mrs. Hayes, do you have evidence supporting your claim that the child expressed preference? I opened my mouth, but nothing came out. My heartbeat was pounding too loud for thoughts to form, and all I could think was, if the judge believes her, I might lose him forever. Then the courtroom doors opened. George hurried in, slightly out of breath, holding a folder and what looked like a half-crushed Starbucks bag. Your Honor, apologies. Parking was a nightmare. Someone boxed in my car, and I had to beg a teenager with a skateboard to help me maneuver out. The judge raised an eyebrow. A few people chuckled. Even I felt a tiny smile tug at my lips. George handed the judge a USB drive. This contains a video recorded by a neighbor, time-stamped, original file intact. Emily shifted in her seat. Your Honor, that video was manipulated. But the judge held up a hand. We'll review it. The screen flickered to life. There was Lucas, sitting on my backyard steps, leaning against me. His voice, small, sincere, filled the courtroom. I feel safe here. If anything ever happens, I want to stay with Grandma. Emily's face went pale. The judge turned to Lucas. Young man, would you like to speak for yourself? Emily grabbed his hand. He's too young. But Lucas looked at me, eyes full of desperation, and whispered, I want to. He walked up to the stand, legs trembling. The judge leaned forward gently. Tell us what you feel. Lucas swallowed hard. I love my mom, but I want to stay with Grandma. I want to feel safe. My breath shattered. The entire room fell silent, and in that silence, everything changed. Emily reacted the moment Lucas stepped down from the stand. She stood abruptly, her chair scraping against the floor. Your Honor, he's been coached, she argued. My son would never say those things unless someone influenced him. Her voice cracked, not with sadness, but with panic. The judge remained calm. Miss Parker, this is not the time for speculation. The child spoke clearly. We will proceed with temporary arrangements until further evaluation. Temporary arrangements. My heart stilled. It could mean anything, good or terrible. Emily tried again. She's trying to replace me. She always meddles. Enough, the judge said firmly. For now, visitation will be supervised. We'll reconvene after Child Services conducts an assessment. I exhaled shakily, unsure whether this was victory or another cliff I was standing on the edge of. When the hearing adjourned, Lucas rushed toward me before anyone could stop him. He wrapped his arms around my waist so tightly I could barely breathe. "Grandma," he said into my sweater, "did I do something wrong?" My throat tightened. "No, sweetheart. You were brave. So brave." Emily called his name sharply, but Lucas didn't let go. The bailiff gave us a polite but sympathetic nod, as if silently granting us 10 more seconds. Finally, Lucas pulled back just enough to lock at me. His eyes shimmered. "You smell like cookies?" he whispered. "Did you hide snacks again?" A tiny laugh escaped me. "Maybe a little." Behind us, George nearly tripped over his own Starbucks cup he'd left on the bench. Coffee splashed everywhere. "Well," he muttered, "that's one way to make an exit." Lucas snickered, the sound small but real. As we walked out of the courthouse, Emily stayed several steps behind, whispering angrily into her phone. Lucas kept glancing back at me, and each glance felt like another small thread tying our hearts together. Outside, the wind was sharp. My Toyota Camry sat near the back of the lot. George walked with me, papers tucked under his arm. "This isn't over," he said quietly, "but today was important." "I'm scared," I admitted. "You're human," he replied, "and you're fighting for someone worth the fear." Before we reached the car, Lucas tugged free from Emily and ran to me again. "Grandma," he whispered hurriedly, "if they make me go somewhere, will you still come find me?" Tears burned behind my eyes. "Always." Emily stormed over and grabbed his arm. "Lucas, get in the car!" He didn't resist, but he looked back at me until the very last second. As their car pulled away, George handed me a stack of documents. "These are the next steps, and try not to panic when you read them." I frowned. "Why?" He hesitated. "Because Emily just filed an emergency request." I opened the paper. She was asking permission to relocate Lucas to another state. The ground beneath me seemed to tilt. The next morning, George called before the sun even came up. His voice was low, urgent. "Margaret, the court is reviewing Emily's relocation request today. We need to move fast." My stomach dropped. "Today? She just filed it yesterday." "I know. She marked it as an emergency, claims she has a job opportunity in another state, and that you're interfering." Interfering. The word tasted bitter. All I'd ever done was love my grandson. George arrived at my house within an hour, carrying a stack of folders inside an Amazon envelope. His hair was messy, and he smelled faintly of day-old Starbucks. "We need to gather anything that shows Lucas isn't safe being moved so abruptly." My throat tightened. What if I don't have enough? Then we find more. As he spread papers across my small kitchen table, Avery shuffled in through the back door, carrying her tablet. "I heard Emily's up to nonsense again," she said without knocking. "Well?" Actually, I didn't hear it. My daughter texted me, but close enough. Despite my panic, I let out a trembling laugh. Avery sat down and pulled up a video. "Look at this. Last month, Emily left Lucas alone outside for almost an hour. I recorded it because I thought she'd come after my cat again. Turns out it might actually help." The footage showed Lucas sitting alone on the curb, swinging his legs, looking lost. Car engines passed, no adult in sight. George's eyes flashed with hope. "This is huge." Just then, another neighbor, Mrs. Hensley, knocked on my screen door. She lived 3 houses down and usually spent her time yelling at squirrels. "I heard y'all talking," she said, stepping in without waiting for permission. "That woman, Emily, she leaves that boy alone all the time. I've called out to him from my porch when he looked scared." George blinked. "Ma'am, would you be willing to testify?" She shrugged. "Do I get to miss bingo night? Absolutely." Even in the chaos, I snorted. As we organized statements, Lucas's school bus drove by outside. The sound alone made my heart ache. My fingers tightened around a folder. "George," I whispered, "what if she wins? What if they let her take him away?" He paused, looked straight at me. "Then we appeal, and if that fails, we appeal again. You're not out of options." But fear still clawed at my ribs. Before leaving for court, I sat on my old porch chair, the wood creaking beneath me. Lucas wasn't here, but I imagined his small hand in mine, warm, trusting. I whispered into the morning air, "I won't let them take you, I promise." George opened the car door. "Margaret, there's something else." I looked up. He held out a document Emily had filed along with her request. She told the court you're emotionally unstable. The world tilted, but before panic could swallow me, George continued. And the judge didn't buy it. Instead, he ordered a full review, which means we still have a fighting chance. My breath returned in a shaky rush. A fighting chance. Maybe that was all a grandmother ever needed. The following week felt like stepping into a storm that wouldn't end. George and I met with the child services investigator, a woman named Miss Carter, with tired eyes and a calm voice. She spoke gently, but her questions were razor sharp. "We've received reports," she said, flipping through a folder, "that Lucas has been left unsupervised multiple times. We're verifying everything." I swallowed hard. "He's a good boy. He needs stability." "We're trying to determine where that stability is," she replied. Later that day, we drove around the neighborhood gathering formal statements. Mrs. Hensley insisted on reading hers out loud, all while shaking an accusatory finger at a squirrel climbing a tree. "That woman leaves the boy alone too often, and that squirrel, I swear he's plotting against me." George coughed to hide a laugh. Even I cracked a smile despite the tension. Avery handed Miss Carter a flash drive. "Here's the clip from my porch camera. I didn't mean to record her. I was checking if the raccoons were back." When they played the footage in George's office, my chest tightened. The video showed Emily pulling Lucas by the arm, her voice raised. "You're so dramatic. Stop crying. I don't have time for this." Lucas wiped his face, shoulders trembling. He couldn't have been more than 6 in the clip. I covered my mouth. "He never told me." George put a hand over mine. "You're seeing what he couldn't say." That afternoon, I went to Lucas's school hoping just to see him walk to recess. I stood near the fence while pretending to study a sheet of custody guidelines printed on the back of a Starbucks napkin George had handed me. When Lucas finally walked out with his class, his head was down. But then he glanced up. Our eyes met through the chain-link fence. He didn't wave. He didn't smile. But he pressed both hands against the fence, as if trying to reach me through the gaps. I whispered, "I'm right here, sweetheart." Emily stepped out from behind the school building, phone in hand. When Lucas saw her, he dropped his hands and hurried after her. She didn't look at him. She just kept talking. George called me over. "There's more," he said quietly. "Child Services found something." Back at my house, Miss Carter stood in my living room holding several papers. "We reviewed Miss Parker's financial records," she said. "Some of the funds intended for Lucas's care weren't used appropriately." My stomach twisted. "What do you mean?" She didn't answer. Instead, she handed George a sealed envelope. He opened it slowly. Inside were documents, bank statements, receipts, copies of forms. My eyes landed on the words, "suspicious withdrawals, misuse of dependent benefits, pending investigation." George let out a long breath. "Margaret, this changes everything." I felt my knees weaken, but before fear could take me, Miss Carter added softly, "For now, the court is considering shifting temporary custody." My heart stopped. Shifted. To whom? She looked directly at me. "To you." The courtroom felt different that morning, heavy, expectant, as if everyone inside knew something irreversible was about to happen. I sat beside George, my palms damp against my skirt. Emily sat on the opposite side of the room, arms folded tightly, her jaw clenched so hard I could see the muscle twitch from where I sat. When the judge finally entered, the room fell silent. He adjusted his glasses and looked down at the stack of documents, financial reports, statements from neighbors, and the video Avery had provided. After reviewing the evidence, he began, and given concerns about the child's emotional well-being, the court will grant temporary custody to Mrs. Margaret Hayes. The words didn't sink in at first. It felt like air rushing into a sealed room. Emily shot up from her seat. "You can't do that. I'm his mother." The judge raised a hand calmly. "Miss Parker, this arrangement is temporary pending further evaluation. You will still have supervised visitation." Emily shook her head violently. "This is unbelievable. She's turning him against me." George leaned closer and whispered, "Do not respond. Let the court speak for you." I didn't trust my voice anyway. My throat felt like it was wrapped in a knot. The bailiff escorted Emily aside as she continued arguing with her lawyer. Meanwhile, Lucas, who had waited in the quiet room, was led into the hall. When he spotted me from across the courthouse lobby, something inside him broke open. "Grandma!" He ran faster than I'd ever seen him run. I barely had time to hold out my arms before he collided with me, hugging me so tightly I staggered back a step. "I knew you'd come," he breathed. "I knew it." I kissed the top of his head. "You're safe now, sweetheart. You're coming home with me." George sniffed loudly behind us. "Well," he said, rubbing his nose, "that's my yearly quota of feelings." Lucas giggled, a tiny, fragile sound, but real. We walked out of the courthouse toward my Toyota Camry. The wind was crisp, and Lucas shivered, pressing closer to me. George handed me a small tote bag containing Lucas's jacket. "Emily threw it on the floor," he muttered. "I rescued it before someone stepped on it." When Lucas climbed into the back seat, he found an old Starbucks cup rolling on the floor and held it up. "Grandma, is this George's?" George groaned. "Just pretend you never saw it." As we drove away, Lucas stared out the window, watching the courthouse shrink behind us. After a moment, he whispered, "Grandma, can we have cocoa tonight?" My heart warmed. "We can make the biggest mug in Pennsylvania." When we reached home, Lucas stepped onto the porch and touched the old wooden chair, the same one he used to climb onto to spy squirrels with me. "It feels like home again," he said softly, and for the first time in months, the world felt a little less heavy. A year later, life had settled into a gentle rhythm, one I never imagined possible during those months of chaos. Lucas had grown taller, his cheeks fuller, his laughter louder. He did his homework at the kitchen table every afternoon, his Kindle buried under worksheets he never remembered to put away. And every morning before school, he wrapped his arms around me, as if afraid I might disappear. But he wasn't that frightened little boy anymore. He was steady, safe. Emily, meanwhile, had completed her counseling program. The report said she showed improvement and increased emotional insight. At first, I didn't know what to do with that information. Part of me wanted to protect what we had built, to keep our little world undisturbed. But another part, maybe the wiser part, remembered that Lucas deserved more than bitterness between the adults who loved him. So, one mild spring afternoon, I invited her over. Emily arrived nervously, her hands clasped, her eyes avoiding mine. Lucas ran into the yard the moment he heard her car, but he didn't throw himself into her arms like he used to. Instead, he approached carefully, hopeful, but cautious. "Hi, buddy," she said softly. "Hi, Mom." They hugged, and I watched his small face press into her coat. It wasn't the desperate cling he used to give me, it was gentler, more balanced. Healing had begun in places I could not see. Emily turned to me slowly. "Margaret, I know I hurt you. I hurt him too. I can't undo it, but I'm trying. I'm really trying." For a long moment I didn't speak. The wind rustled the branches over our wooden porch chair, and somewhere in the distance a lawnmower buzzed. I could have listed every way she failed. I could have held on to the past like a shield. Instead I said, "Thank you for working on yourself. Lucas deserves a mom who's present. If you keep doing the work, I'm willing to rebuild something." Her eyes filled. She nodded. A few supervised visits turned into longer ones. They played board games in the living room, watered the small garden Lucas and I planted, even read together on the porch. Sometimes George stopped by, pretending he just happened to be in the neighborhood, though Lucas teased him mercilessly for driving past the house twice before parking. One evening, after Emily left and the sky turned a soft pink, Lucas and I sat in the backyard with 2 mugs of warm cocoa. The air smelled like fresh grass, and the sun dipped behind the fence line. Lucas leaned against me, legs swinging off the patio step. "Grandma?" "Yes, sweetheart." He exhaled slowly, the way kids do when they're trying to say something big. "I don't get scared at night anymore." I kissed the top of his head. "I'm glad." He looked up at me, eyes reflecting the fading light. "It's because you're my safe place." The world went quiet. I held him closer, feeling everything, every battle, every bruise, every miracle, settle softly inside my heart. And for the first time in a long time, I felt truly home. Some evenings feel quieter than others, not empty, just peaceful in a way I once thought I'd never feel again. A few months after the spring thaw, Lucas and I developed a small ritual, a slow walk around the neighborhood just before sunset. He always insisted on bringing the tiny flashlight he never actually used, and I always pretended not to notice when he slipped an extra granola bar into my coat pocket, in case of emergencies. The world around us had changed, but in the gentlest way. Neighbors waved more often, asking about Lucas's school projects or teasing him about his fast-growing legs. Even Emily walked with us sometimes, staying a few steps behind at first, then slowly drifting closer. The three of us didn't talk about courtrooms or counselors anymore. Instead, we talked about gardens and summer fairs and the stray orange cat that somehow believed our porch belonged to him. One evening, while Lucas chased fireflies across the backyard, Emily stood beside me, watching him with a soft, almost unfamiliar smile. "He seems lighter," she murmured. "He is," I said. "And so are you." She didn't deny it. Healing has a way of speaking without words. When Lucas finally wandered back to us, he wrapped one arm around each of our waists. "Can we stay like this forever?" he asked sleepily. I rested my cheek on his hair. "We can stay like this tonight," I answered. "And tomorrow, we'll see." Because families aren't built from perfection. They're built from choosing each other again and again, even after the hard seasons. And as the fireflies blinked like tiny lanterns around us, I realized something simple but profound. We had all survived the storm, and now, finally, we were learning how to grow in the sunlight again.